Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I welcome our guests and I honor them because I know that they're coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive, their time. Thank you so much for coming and spending some of this quality commodity, if you will. It is precious. 24 hours is offered to every man and woman on this planet. And if we don't know how to use it, it will show in your life. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. And Gwendolyn is coming to give us an opportunity to learn of her. And it has deposited a couple of things in her that we want access to: wisdom, knowledge, insights, all of these things. Why? Because you and I have an opportunity to become better humans while we are here on this planet. Gwendolyn, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for inviting me.
It is an honor. And as my custom is, as I have a couple of customs here that I love, is to uh, ask this question to the individual. As I mentioned to you, that I believe that we have several positions or offices that we acquire as we walk through our journey. And the last is that of a servant. How do you serve mankind?
I hope to open their eyes to opportunities, concepts that will help them be hopeful about the future, to make decisions that are not too quickly, but yet sound, based on experiences and thought and reflection. I think reflection is probably one of the greatest gifts that any person can give themselves. It's time to reflect on the events and decisions that they've had in their life and see what they can learn as they go along.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing to teach because I'm a dad of 5 boys. And I remember I used to teach my boys that every decision has fruit. Some of them are instantaneously, some of them 5 years, 10 years, whatever. But every decision that we make on this planet have a corresponding result. Now, I would tell them the breath between answering that question or whatever, making that decision, that is your power. Take it and allow the decision, the thoughts of all the things that are being placed before you to marinate in your being, and then decide. Because once you've decided, the only thing that remains is and are and will be the consequences of that
Yes.
decision. So one of the things that we do here and also is to go back because we want to get to know you. And I tell people that there are a couple of spaces that we travel in life as we are born on this planet. And one of the first space that we hang out for a few years is that of called the family unit. And we will reside there and then we will move forward in life to quote unquote, to become adults, independent. And
Oh, that's
so,
so scary. Yes. Yes.
so we want to get an opportunity to learn of you. That first unit, they say, is a family. And in that family, we are going to learn a couple of things, Gwendolyn. We're going to learn about our beliefs. We're going to start learning about that. We're going to develop, quote unquote, our modus operandus to think and live, communication skills, all of these different things we're going to learn there. What was your family unit like?
Well, I came from a family of 2 teachers who were both of the Depression era. So they both had their own experiences with extreme poverty. They both believed wholeheartedly in education being the greatest pathway or tool to change your life. And they were both strong believers in the word. And when I say the word, it is whether it's the word that you give to someone else or the words of wisdom that you share with other people, to always be precise and thoughtful about those words that you put out into the world, because they can have profound effects.
Well, I know there's this book that's called the Bible, and it says that there is power in words. In fact, those powers, it tells us, is life and death. So we have to be very mindful. And I tell people this because of those power of words, because of the power of words, be very mindful of what you say to yourself and
Yes.
what you allow people to say to you. Because if it contains life and death, again, those are results based on those words and what you allow into your belief system. So here you are housed within 2 teachers. I mean, you're going to be getting it from both sides, if you will. And
Yes, we did.
both teachers understand the value of education they saw, and they are familiar with what it does and what it can produce in one's life. And so now they're going to deposit the importance of learning, the power of words, education, all the different nuances that goes with the terminology education. How did Gwendolyn, in that home with these two teachers, and I'm sure those teachers have strong personalities because of their education, how did that begin to form you?
Well, I think probably the most important thing that I learned to do as a child was to spend a certain amount of time alone.
Mm-hmm.
I was never a particularly sociable child. I got along with people, but when I wanted to resolve, as a child, you're like, well, dad says this, mom says this, my friends are doing this. And so I am in the middle of trying to decide how am I going to accept whether it's discipline or permission or plans for the future. I became very comfortable by myself. I did not, I wanted to go outside and live kind of in an imaginary world,
Mm-hmm.
but it was outdoors in nature, away from the house where I had my own little world of I could play through,
Yeah.
what I would say back to dad if I was brave enough to say it back to dad, or what argument could I come to mom with if I wanted to change her mind. And sometimes it was just, well, shoot, I'm just going to have to come to terms with what they've decided, and how am I going to be happy within that framework. So I think the time alone was very beneficial to me.
That's pretty insightful stuff for a young individual to have at such a young age. The fact that the choice of being alone, because most people tend to want to be in a crowd, and a young individual choosing and deciding that that's important to them is really cool. And then there's the other thing where you're still mingling amongst another teacher, because I think one of the greatest teachers, Gwendolyn, is nature. So here you are just surrounded by teachers all over the place, and you are
Yes.
in the midst of this, observing, because again, you are making decisions, you're looking and learning at a young age some critical thinking skills, if you will. I need
Yes.
to understand and process mom and dad and my friends and so forth, and myself amongst this cauldron of individuals. And this young girl is implementing critical thinking skills at such a young age. She is moving through life and beginning to hone her craft, if you will, of her critical thinking skills. And she's moving on in her life. What was her communication skills? I understand being by yourself, but what was your communication skills being with others?
Well, what I enjoyed in school as far as communicating, I was not a very good public speaker because I was timid. I didn't like being in public. I got nervous. But there were things that I wanted to do in order to be successful. This was a time when girls were expected to go straight into typing class. Guys went to shop. There were a little more traditional male-female roles. But my dad had been very clear in saying that he did not want me limited to those roles. And so he actually fought with the schools because typing was the classical girl's career, being
Yeah.
a secretary. And
Mm-hmm.
he said, don't learn how to do something that you don't want to do the rest of your life. And so he encouraged me to take something besides typing. So I ended up in not just Latin, but a good many of the science classes because, of course, they appealed to me. I was already a lover of nature, so anything about animals or the planets or the weather, what
Yeah.
caused things to happen, were fascinating. So it opened up a world to me that allowed me to, if I was passionate about something, I could share that with other people. And I loved to do like displays so
Uh-huh.
that they weren't just listening to me. They could see things that helped them sort of, what I wanted them to do was absorb that ability to reflect on where you want to be in relation to what's happening around you. So I loved to do those kinds of things. When I had to speak in class, I always had something to share or show people.
Yeah.
So that became my way of sharing my thoughts.
That is awesome. I love the gift that your dad gave you. What a powerful gift at that time. And again, we have to deal with what is relevant. And in that time, you were breaking the rules, if you will, and even your dad in the fact that he began to stand up to you, for you, on your behalf in a system that is set up to begin to program us as to
Right.
our behavior, as to where we belong. And
Yeah.
your dad kind of put a kink in that programming, and I love that because that
Put a big kink in it.
it
Yes.
it takes guts to do something like that. And again, we have to go back into the time frame as to when he did that and you, because as you said, we had our defined role. I remember in school when I came to America as a young man, that the same mentality. Guys were thrown in the shop and girls were typing and stuff like that, secretarial program. And again, as I said, there, society is one of our programmers that we have to overcome. And I love what your dad did and what a present he offered to you. As you're moving through life, and again, we have this young girl. What a beautiful start, Gwendolyn, that you're having in your life is some of the things that you're learning at a young age. You're heading into college now and you're looking at your future. Of course, you have your support in mom and dad, and you are proficient, if you will, in the science part of understanding. When you're looking towards college, Gwendolyn, which college did you pick and why did you pick it? And what field of study did you pick?
Well, there comes the real first twist in life. Because I was a nature person, I was also a critter person,
Mm-hmm.
as we call ourselves today. Every little squirrel that was injured in the yard by a storm, I was bringing it in the house. Every little baby rabbit whose nest was run over when we were mowing the grass. Every little dog that was standing on the corner at the library. Everything came home with me. And so it sort of became just an expectation. This was way before the time of career counselors, but it was just an expectation that I would be a veterinarian.
Mm-hmm.
It was just society simply said, you love to heal animals, therefore you need to be a veterinarian. And so when it was time for college, of course, finances was quite a challenge. So it wasn't that I could pick any private school in the state. And the best known school as far as taking classes to move on to veterinary school, Clemson University was the one because it had the pre-vet programs. It focused heavily on science. But it didn't take me but one semester of dissecting animals and living with the death of these little baby pigs and things that you were expected to dissect. And the thought of being the person whose career would involve a lifetime of not just helping animals, but oftentimes making the critical decision of euthanizing them, putting them out of their suffering. And it was something that I knew I could not do. Still was teary. And so I found myself at the end of my first year struggling with where I was going to go. And the university was merciless in that you could not register for another class until you declared a major.
Wow.
So, and I was definitely not going to stay in the zoology major that was going to send me to vet school. And so I spent a half of a semester. No, I spent a semester. I simply signed up for a load of easy classes. The most open major at the time, the one that would allow you to take the widest variety of classes, was psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that just sent my father off the charts, with his only people in psychology are people that need psychologists. So no, no, no. But I had to pick. I had to make a choice. And that one allowed me to, explore a little
Yeah.
bit more. And at that point, I think the good Lord had a hand in it because there was a senior only elective course in the College of Agriculture
Mm-hmm.
called Horse Science 412. And when I turned in my little matriculation card, the little thing you poke the holes in to register yourself with at that point in time, I don't think Microsoft had been invented at that point. So you had this card and I turned it in and they're like, well, no, you need to make 2 or 3 other choices because you're not going to get in that elective. And I was like, why not? And they said, because it's a senior only class. It's always full. You just won't get in. So put down 2 others. And I said, no, there's nothing else I want to take. So I'll just be short on hours if I don't get in that class. I got my schedule, a few weeks later, and I had gotten into that class because there weren't enough seniors who signed up for it to even make the class. And that was my introduction, not only to a totally different world that I understood, and that was the world of agriculture, but it also put me in touch with people because I'd always just loved horses. I was one of those horse crazy girls, even though I
Yeah.
didn't have horses. It put me in the realm of meeting people who actually had horses and actually being around horses for a pretty substantial period of time in my coursework.
Yeah.
And that was a phenomenal change because once I found my place in the world of agriculture, it was like, I'm done. I'm at
Yeah.
peace now. I have found my spot,
I
as
love
it were.
that. Yeah, beautiful story, Gwendolyn. Such insight and such nuggets that are in that story as I was listening to it. And I just wanted to point out to those guys, the listeners out there, did you get the piece where she said, when you want to manifest something, sometimes you have to go against the grain, if you will. You have to push. People will tell you you can't do something. It is up to you to change that. I've heard that so many times in health, translated in healthcare, in jobs, in position, in class, like you said. I was just talking to a gentleman this morning when the doctor told him that his injury, he will never be able to walk and move his hands and do anything like that. Now he's a trainer. He's stuff
So,
like that. So
yeah, with that.
people will always say things, because that's the norm, the program that they have. You went up and the program was, no, this is not for, uh, only for students of seniors and so forth. That's the program, and they will recite the program. And you now have to change the program, and you make your declaration, and quote unquote, that people say some people say the universe, those that don't believe in God, and then those that believe in God. I'm a believer in God. It says, and you said the good Lord did. Let me tell you something. Once you decide something, it's amazing how things work behind the scenes to make it
Yes,
come to pass. So
yes,
believe, and again, you learn the power of words. No, this is what I want. And when you say that with your belief system, things will work behind the scenes to make that manifestation come to pass. So be very mindful. So here you are, you got into your stuff, you found your space, you are lighting up. Life is good. You are living the dream, as they say. As you're moving through your life, you got your passionate dad. I love his response to the whole thing. As you're moving through life and you're moving towards quote unquote independence when you're on your own and you started looking at your life and you got out there and you're working, how is Gwendolyn doing? How is she as an individual managing her days on this planet?
well, I was committed to learning everything that I could, and so definitely threw myself into the world of agriculture because I did not grow up on a farm. In fact, having been, you know, in the lives of poverty that both my father and my mother had been in as children, it was almost anything but farming
Yeah.
because they had come up through the time of, oh, get a job, live a better life. You don't want to do this manual labor, this hard, difficult work. So that it was against their grain just a
Hmm.
little bit. They were but they realized that I was happy and that there was that at the end of that degree there would be other doors that would open. So they I guess they settled to be happy for me
Yeah.
because I was extraordinarily happy. I worked. I took a job with the university in one of the agriculture departments. I was there all the time, weekends, holidays. I just really immersed myself in that world so that I could learn as much as I could, considering I was getting a fairly late start on learning about agriculture
Yeah.
as a person who was committed to it and felt like I was at home. I really knew I was lacking in background information.
And as you acquired, Gwendolyn, through, and I tell people to learn to become a disciple. Disciples are the ones that get things done. If they call it, a master of many trades, something, I can't remember the phrase that they
Jack
were
of
saying,
all trades.
jack of all trades, a master of none. When you get in there and begin to acquire the knowledge, the dedication to it, that's what a disciple is. One who's disciplined in acquiring something and doing something is a disciple. And so I always encourage people to become a disciple in whatever it is. Once you become a disciple, you'll be amazed at what happens. So here you are acquiring the knowledge through your discipline, your discipleship. As you're moving through life and you gained your knowledge, if you will, and you're coming to the place where you are going to be being ushered into employment and all those different things. What was that like when you got all that knowledge, when you did all your dedication, and now you're coming out, graduating? Where did you head?
Well, I was actually going on to pursue a master's degree, and there were a number of changes at the university. So suddenly, within 3 days of graduation, there was a great deal of upheaval in my life. I was set and ready to go to a different city, work there, study there, get a master's degree. And suddenly that opportunity was simply taken away. It was just gone in a matter literally of 3 days. And so I'm sitting there as graduation is approaching and graduation day is there. I don't have a job. I don't have any hope of a job. I don't really know exactly what I'm going to do at this point because I had really laser focused on studying. It was a kind of an impact of agriculture on the natural world. It was where I was looking at in my master's degree. And again, the good Lord intervened. There was a local farm who had agreed to hire one of my classmates into a position on their farm, and he went off after graduation and simply didn't return. He didn't show up for the first day of his job. And I had a professor who had been a good influence on me throughout my college career, and he called me and he said, "Well, I know of a job. I don't know that you'll want it, but they desperately need an employee, and I think that you probably desperately need a job. So let me take you out and introduce you to this farm family, and let's just see. Maybe it'll give you a temporary landing spot." So I actually came out to this farm, and it was a family farm of four brothers and three sisters. I met the older brothers, and they, of course, said, "Well, we don't want to hire a woman." And I said, "Well, I don't really want to work on a hog farm." But at this point, we both are sort of hanging out without an answer to our problem. And about that time, my husband popped into the shop. He wasn't my husband at the time. This young, handsome man came walking in. I thought he was the next door neighbor. And I went home actually that day and told my roommate I had met the man I wanted to marry. And so they decided to give me the job. And I decided that, yes, I was desperate enough for work. I needed to pay my rent. So I took the job, and the rest kind of became history. The young helper that worked at the farm on the hog section of this farm, when they carried me in and introduced me to him and said, "This is your new boss," he threw down his tools and got in his truck and said, "I ain't working for no woman," and drove off. So there I was on a 1,500 hog operation, barrow to finish, and I had just lost my only hope of work. But again, it was a case of wanting to be somewhere so bad that at that point, it was like, I don't care. It doesn't matter to
Yeah.
me. I will drive however far I have to drive. I will get up at whatever time I have to get up because I want to stay in this world. So and I stayed there for a year and a half before we decided to get married. And at that point, along came this, "Well, gee, I don't know that I want you working for my family."
Hmm.
That could be, for some problems in the future. And I had been injured in an automobile accident. So I called my dad up and I said, given this a little bit of thought, if I want to have a steady income without necessarily the dangers and potential risks of a career in agriculture, or worse yet, as a career in agricultural sales, which would have meant a lot of traveling. And he said, I had dealt with a young disabled man in some of my time there on the farm. And I said, what if I decided I wanted to teach special needs children? And my dad, again, had the wisdom to say, I think you've got too tender of a heart. You would all want to take them all home and adopt them, and that's not possible. So why don't you take a job it would give you the opportunity to work with people with disabilities, but not be immersed in that world quite so harshly. He was concerned that I would not do well there. And so as it turned out, again, the Lord worked it out. In 6 months, I had the coursework needed to become a science teacher. Based on all the science courses that I had had in college, it only took 6 months to finish everything that I needed to have a teaching certificate in
Yeah.
science. And so I've completed that. My husband and I married, and shortly thereafter, I got my first teaching offer to teach
Wow.
school in the county where we live.
I love that story. You have dedication, you have determination, you have all those different qualities that are sitting within that story. And I hope you guys are listening because it's a powerful story that she's telling us her life. And within that stories, there's so much in it that you guys can extract and use in your life. So you're now a teacher. You've arrived. You've done the study. You got your young man, you got your husband, you got all the things right now, and you're in your field that you wanted to be. When you got there, Gwendolyn, how did you land, if you will? What resonated within your being? Because your dad, again, that's an insightful father that gave you that advice and how he laid it out, seeing you and understanding the type of individual you are with your heart. How did you land?
Well, the first year, I was simply a fill-in teacher for a person who quit like 3 days before school started. This teacher walked out, was offered a better paying job in industry and said, "Hey guys, see ya." And they called me and said, "Do you think you can teach physics and chemistry?" And I said, "I can teach anything.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I have the teacher's guide, I can teach anything." So that was my first assignment as a teacher was high school chemistry and physics, which was quite a challenge, no doubt. I spent a lot of time with the math teacher, simply learning, being confident enough in math to be able to teach the principles in physics. But I also had a very dear friend of a biology teacher. Then suddenly at the end of that year, we were tasked with choosing, did we want to go to the new high school that was being built, or would we be willing to take other jobs within the county? And knowing that they were merging multiple schools and that there was expected to be a lot of pushback from the communities. They did not want to merge school. They wanted their own unique community high schools, and they were merging them together. So I chose at that point to take a job offer in middle school science, which was totally away from what I had wanted to do. I had wanted to be in the high school, but I didn't feel like I had enough experience to deal with what might arise in a school that was struggling with its own identity. So I took the middle school job, and it was such a gift because middle schoolers are so, "Oh, it's so horrible," or, "Oh, it's so great." There's nothing in the middle with middle schoolers. Those tweens it is either the most horrible day they've ever seen or the most wonderful day they've ever seen. But they're also learning to make decisions on their own because they want to be different from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during those years in the middle school that I formed some very strong bonds with other teachers who believed, like I did, that number one, memorizing a lot of facts and details was not what middle schoolers needed to do. The first thing that those of us that grew close together believed was that the most important thing you could teach a middle schooler was to laugh at themselves.
Mm-hmm.
To stop taking the world so seriously. "Oh, it's all against me." To be able to say, "Well, this is what I want," and then say, "Well, maybe that's not what I want." It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to find a window when one of the doors in your life is closed. And so we all, we grew close, and that was a very strong support group for me in my first 17 years of teaching.
That's
To
awesome.
to be part of a group that didn't take themselves so seriously that they could not see the needs of the kids around them.
That
And
is
it was a
that's
great
awesome,
experience.
Gwendolyn. Because I tell people, like, the kids when they're young and they're in the chair and they're sitting down with with their fingers in their mouth or whatever, they're being programmed about the food that they want. McDonald's, all that stuff is on TV all day long, and they started corrupting what they desire and what they should be eating, their mind, their programming, if you will. And then when you get into middle school, Gwendolyn, they start programming them more on this social behavior and acceptance of things. When you were there and you began to notice this, and I love the fact that you guys came together as a team and began to adjust certain things because you understood that this was necessary versus the memorization of nothing. How did that group impact those kids? What did you see and notice as you began to focus on these young individuals? And again, it's social behavior with others, but also with self. They are beginning to note this self more and how they react to others. How did your group impact these kids?
We worked really hard to help them find an identity. We were placed on teams in this particular school where I worked, and it was very clear that there was, as in all of life, there's a certain amount of politics.
Hmm.
There are the popular people and the not so popular people. And for my particular group, although there were more of us throughout the school, because it wasn't just our small group, there were people who believed the same way that we did throughout the school, and we would often get together, for planning time or a work day and look
Yeah.
at projects. But for us in particular, this small group, probably one of the most profound things that happened was our school experienced a growth. There was some industry in the community, so the population of students increased, and so they divided up the seventh graders into two teams, and they put one of our teams out into portable units, and that was our team. They put us out into the portable units and said, "Y'all, good luck. It's going to be pouring rain between your units and the building. You're going to have to come in and out for your planning time to copy things all." And so for us ourselves, it was, first of all, we had to figure out how to feel better about, oh, we're the ones getting stuck outside. We're not
Hmm.
the in group of teachers. We're being put outside in the portable units. And so we had a great lead teacher that year, Miss Chavis, and she spent some time, I'm sure, doing some soul searching before school came back. And when we got together as a team for the first time out in our portable units, she said, "All right, we're going to come up with a cool name so that everybody else wishes that they were in the portable units." So we haggled over that, and that was the time when a book called The Outsiders
Hmm.
was experiencing a resurgence in
Yeah.
popularity, but it was something that a lot of us had read in our youth. And so it definitely stuck with us. And so we took on the name The Outsiders, and we had activities that focused on the fight for independence, the struggle for identity.
Yeah.
We did joint activities so that when they left my science class, they were taking with them something perhaps in math that would help them tie to the math. So we did units that utilized English in science and
Hmm.
science in math and math in their English class, so that when they went inside, they had these activities that they could be proud of and share with the other students. And sure enough, it didn't take but about a year, and everybody wanted to be on the outsiders team because they did fun things, but they were always linked to their learning. So that was a great experience for me, and it was a great gift in leadership. And I think the kids came to be proud of being outsiders. It gave them an identity that they didn't have to worry about losing
Hmm.
when they walked into the building where there were other students who had more money than they had or drove fancier cars or
Yeah.
wore better clothes, because those things didn't matter when you went to be an outsider.
Yeah. That is awesome. I love that. That's a great insight and vision that your leader had. As you're moving through your life, and life happens, as they say, and we all have to deal with things. Gwendolyn, we have to go through periods of ups and downs. And I tell people life is not and never will be a linear journey. There are pits and all of these different things. And you've gone through some, you've mentioned all those things, and you've mentioned ways of how you came out. As we are doing this podcast, Gwendolyn, and you've gained all this knowledge, and as you're moving through life and you have spent time with the young ones, what is your advice to those today that are listening that may have young kids, if you will, as to how to interject some of the stuff that you've learned for all these years with these children? How can a mom and dad that is listening to our podcast, what type of advice would you be able to give to some of them concerning their um, middle school kids or wherever they are? How can you help mom and dad through this period? What advice would you give to them?
I think the most important thing that you can teach a child at that time is first of all that choices have consequences, and that it's very important for them at that early age to learn that if I have two choices to make in my life, when I make that choice, then I am opening up a world of opportunities that go with that choice. But at the same time, you are losing a series of opportunities. By your very choice, you have given yourself some opportunities, but you have also removed some opportunities from your table. And I think that a lot of middle schoolers, and I don't think it's limited necessarily to middle schoolers. People tend to think, well, I can do this and have this too. It goes back to the old saying, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you make a choice, for example, with a teenager, if you make the choice to run with someone and they choose to drink and drive, then you have made that choice. And if you're caught, there will be consequences, and you have given up your opportunity to live a life, perhaps without a legal record. If you choose to take a particular class, then you may be giving up the opportunity to take another class that might not be offered again in the time frame of your years in that school. Like at Clemson, there were courses that sometimes I wanted to take, but they were only offered every other year.
Hmm.
And if you skipped that course that particular semester, if it was truly something that you were really interested in, for example, the horse science class, I would have been on up as a senior in some other major, perhaps, had I not stuck with being in that class, because I would not have had another opportunity to take it. And life is all about that. When you make a choice, if you're not completely relinquishing the opportunities that would have been had you made the other choice, then you are at least postponing them. And you must decide in yourself, what am I willing to give up to commit to this choice that I'm making? Because you will give something up.
Yes.
It's just a matter of making the decision what it is that you want badly enough to give up the other things that you'll lose.
Yeah, the crossroads and the crossroads. And I used to tell my kids, the decisions are the crossroads. You have to really look at what you are deciding, the cost, because as
The
I said
cost.
to them, there's a cost to
Yes.
every decision. There is, and then as I said, once you've made it, the only thing that remains are the consequences, the cost. And so this was my advice to them. When people are coming at you with this and then that, tell them that, give me a minute and I'll get back to you. As a leader, my staff would come to all this stuff. And I would tell them, give me a minute. I'll get you an answer in a minute. And I would move aside, Gwen, when I would move aside, I would go. And because I would tell them, I said, most of the time, the situation will work itself out. You just have to allow the time. And so they were, and I would move aside and come back in about 30 minutes or whatever. I'd be sitting there thinking about it. When I came back, they're like, oh, it worked out. And
Hmm.
so, um, and then there are those times when you have to make those decisions, and the contemplation times where you have to go inside and seek answers from the inside and not just hear, but you
Yeah,
need
that's
some
right.
guidance.
Yeah.
And you go in, you talk to your God, you talk, and you come out and you make that decision. And like you said, there's consequences. There's certain things that you're giving up from that decision. And I've had, and that's the thoughts, the powerful, constant, I did some work in the prison in Rikers Island in New York. And I remember standing in front of them and I told them, I said, all you guys are here because you couldn't control your thought. And when I began to expound on that, they began to see that it was their thoughts. Someone says, hey, let's go rob this bank. Let's go kill this person. Let's go steal this. And you agreed with that thought and you're here. And so that advice that you gave to those that are listening and that are listening, I hope you got it. I always tell people, go back. It's a tape thing. Go back and listen to it again and change your life. So here you are, when you've gone through so much and you talked about your desire for what people, not just kids. 2025, we're here. I think it's in February now. It's moving so fast already. What is your advice to us all? You're here at this podcast and you have a message that has been laid on your heart. You have your tools, which you produce the books and all this thing. What is on your heart at this time? Because this is a critical time that we are here in society and we see what's happening around us and all the different pain and hurt and things that are being experienced outside of where we're at. What is your advice to us, mankind?
I thing that I could do is to teach people to find a quiet moment to let their own thoughts be their guide. And particularly in modern society, we're so bombarded constantly with noise. I call it noise. other people's opinions, other people's thoughts about what happened. And you can absorb that and absorb that and absorb that, but it doesn't settle until you take the time to go somewhere quiet on your own and pick the my daughter calls them gold nuggets out of what it is that you've heard, what it is that you've learned, what it is that you've been exposed to, and decide which ones of those will bring you that lasting piece of making the best decision that you can. And weigh what it is that you're getting. Is it just the money that you're seeking in the job? Is it a new place? Is it an opportunity to excel? Are you running away from something? Is this job really worth getting away from whatever it is that you're trying to escape from? Don't trust society to simply fill your mind full of things that are distractions. You need to find whatever it is. Some people it's music. For me, it's a few quiet minutes at my barn. Find that quiet time to know inside you that you're happy.
But I'm going to leave it there, guys. I mean, there's nothing to say. We're going to provide all of Gwenna's links and so forth for you to get into her world. You should, because what was before us and what is before us is wisdom. Someone that has a heart, and you can sense it in her words and everything that she does. Someone who cares. And when you have someone who cares, that's where you need your safe space to be. And we're going to provide all of her links so that you can have access to her and be a part of her world. And when you get there, come expecting so that you can receive questions. Ask her, talk to her. She'll walk with you. Gwendolyn, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for including me.